No, no bus. A Just Bees book club. I read Ben Mattlin's Disability Pride. Dispatches from a post ADA world. This is like what are we talking about here? Like a 200 page um book from a journalist about sort of specifically about the post ADA generation. So the ADA was passed in 90, I think, is the uh, right around 90, maybe in 88, 89. Um, let's see if I can't find it super quick. Um, uh, the ADA, of course, is the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is a sort of um, big victory of the disability rights movement of like the 70s and 80s. Sort of a post civil rights gathering of people in sort of a uh, similar vein, or very much inspired by the civil rights activists, but for folks with disabilities. It famously is the reason we have things like curb cuts that allow folks with wheelchairs to access sidewalks without having to run over a curb. That are also sort of famously used as an example of the way that providing accessibility standards improves lives for people who are abled. I'm so bad with dates. I like finished this book like 3 days ago. And to be fair, I have since finished Hotel Iris, which will be up also. Uh, but yeah, dates and specifics often uh, they disappear from my brain. Not even after I've finished, but like during. It's always an issue for me. I'm not gonna find the exact passage date of the ADA, but I'm pretty sure it was like 88. So yeah, it's from a disabled journalist named Ben Mattlin, who talks at the beginning about how he was born with spinal muscular atrophy, and has been a wheelchair user for his entire life. Also talks about his privileges as a cis straight man, um, which is a point to sort of come back to. But I guess he's been working as a journalist for basically his entire adult life. I was unfamiliar with him before this, but um, he sort of talks in the introduction about how he has, having been someone born in the 60s, sort of like was very active in the disability rights movement, but has not necessarily kept up with disability activism specifically after the ADA, and sort of wants to take this opportunity of 30 years of the ADA. So there's a whole generation of people who've grown up without knowing the pre-ADA world, and he sort of takes the temperature of the activism, or of activism around that has happened since, and sort of tries to give an overview of where disability rights is at, where disability justice is at, and I think that's where the sort of title comes from. I hadn't really thought about this until I was preparing for this, but I think disability pride is in some way his middle way. um, the sort of bridge between disability rights, again, sort of in the civil rights mode, something very intentionally oriented toward changing broad policy, toward enacting change at the level of policy and law, and visibility often, versus disability justice, which is a newer movement, or newer banner under which movements can sort of unite, that tends to focus significantly more on intersectionality. It still has plenty of representational politics, but the disability justice framework is the thing that I've sort of been trying to learn more about over the last couple of years. I think tends toward, if it isn't exclusively occupied by something with a more anti-capitalist foundation than a rights movement. When you think of disability justice, or when I do, you often think of things like mutual aid first and foremost. Again, intersectionality, um, ways in which ah, my phone buzzed and I got very confused for a second. No buzz. Um, the ways in which having coming out of the depths of the hell of neoliberalism, where the idea of fighting for rights seems almost naive, let's say. Uh, I think that's sort of the world of disability justice. Is I naive is perhaps dismissive. Maybe better to say that the struggles in the past for rights have made their partial successes, but have also made it clear that uh, there are significant failings to a model that relies on uh, change coming from, say, a government, or local government, or a federal government, and I say this, and then I think of all of the jokes that go around of, like Stephen King says trans rights, or K.A. Applegate says trans rights, because in some ways that is the thing, isn't it? We are in some ways in the trans rights period of trans stuff. Hmm. And trans justice, maybe because it doesn't have that prior trans rights framework, sort of begins to sound more, say, justice system oriented. Interesting. I'm just having these thoughts about where discourses are, and I don't have answers for them. Um, you know, yeah. I think the argument that Mattlin might be not might maybe not make, but might be sort of inclined towards, is like, maybe there is no the justice movement without a sort of foundational rights movement. I don't know that I believe that necessarily. Um, but that's sort of what I'm saying, I guess, when I say that disability pride seems to be a sort of like attempt to traverse through both the previous rights movement that he was more engaged in, and the current focus on disability justice that he seems very amenable towards, if even if he doesn't always seem to agree with it. And I'll kind of get into that, but I think the biggest thing that I could compare this to is Disability Visibility, the collection of essays by Alice Wong. Um, Both in that I think they are both really good primer texts, or they work for me. They both work for me as very as good primer texts on sort of a broader swath of disability issues and disability justice politics, and also in that both of them, in sort of trying to be surveys, or take into account a lot of different things, um, have some aspects of them that I find, um, as a Marxist tranny, um, to have somewhat limited of an analysis of political economy, I guess, is basically what I'm thinking of. There are aspects in both of those books about, like, uh, fashion brands that I find inspiring, I guess, and interesting, and to be tackling genuine questions, but to not have an analysis of other kinds of accessibility, let's say, like financial. And and I don't say that to say like it's immoral or whatever to have sort of boutique clothing available to folks with especially physical disabilities. Um, but there isn't even an attempt to talk about how capitalism is sort of engaged in the act of disabling folks. And yeah, that's my own shit. But largely, I think it was just full of stuff that again I have a fucking terrible memory, so I'm gonna have to like note things for myself, which is I guess partially what this is. But like talking about there's a bit sort of early on that didn't really get followed up on about I believe the name is Gary Lomax, who was a Black Panther and also a disability rights activist, and that's somebody I definitely had never heard of before and need to sort of do a little bit more research on, and I'm excited to, hopefully to get some more of that firmly left wing analysis. I bring up political economy and Marxism because that's where my brain always wants to go, but that's not. I don't mean to claim that as exclusively, or an a priori requirement of left wing thought or anything like that. Um, there was like a filmmaker who sounds very interesting. There's a lot of stuff about. I mean, there's like really fucked stuff in there about like um, that there was I believe it was a law around or allowing the use of electroshock therapy on autistic people that was like repealed in 2020, and that then wasn't actually repealed, so that's still not illegal, which is like real fucked. And it names names of the one place that still does that in the U.S., which is interesting. It's useful information potentially to somebody who might be interested in justice. Uh, but yeah, there's just yeah, I came away from, or I started this book and I was like, ooh, this might not be for me, for the explicit reasons that I sort of mentioned, right? Like there's a sense of like this is a person who was active in the 60s or like the 80s, and has basically checked out, and who knows exactly um, how much he's gonna have a perspective that I find particularly useful. But then I found the stuff that just the sheer fact of writing a book on some level means that there's just stuff I simply did not know about, which I was like, okay, maybe I'll push through because of that. And then as it gets more into the disability justice stuff, there were more moments where I was like, I don't think I agree with you on this part, buddy. But there were also more parts where I was like, okay, so he did a pretty good job considering his subject position. And I mean that both in a positive and negative way, right? Uh, there are there's some awkwardnesses around what I would consider fairly basic language around uh, being trans. I don't think I'm an expert in, but I am. But also there are you know there are points of focus that come from him as a lifelong wheelchair user that I simply would not have thought to accentuate. Maybe is a way to put it, and I appreciated that, and not to reduce to identity. There are aspects of him as a journalist where like there's a lot of like a lot of interviews that is very clear that he's either pulling from or conducted where he has a really good eye for how to convey the information that he has seen in a fairly I can't even just say like concise without having to take like 15 seconds to say it. Um, this is deeply, deeply different brain. But yeah, I guess I don't have as much to say about this explicitly as I thought I did. There, but I'm very glad to have read it, and I think I'll probably end up blurbing it for the store just because, yeah, I feel like there's probably more people um, who could use a lot of the knowledge in here, not here. This is just for me. This is just for bees. This is just for bees. Um, yeah, and I'm yeah, just genuinely glad to have read it, and I'm excited to dig deeper into. Maybe I'll like dig through the footnotes for some recommended reading also for the future. That's probably a good idea to do before I hand it off to a friend. Um, yeah, yeah. I really appreciate this book. I had had some rocky moments with it. There's stuff in it that I think could have been done better, or in a way that I would find there's analysis I think that is missing from this, as I said, and I think that's basically what it comes down to. And that's sort of, I mean, that's not the book this is in some ways, right? This is a popular like sort of like, here's my angle, here's the journalism I did on it. That's your book, and it's not like here's how the world fundamentally functions at the level of society and politics and economy. But yeah, I want that book also. Is I guess just what it comes down to. Um, yeah, this is not the most compelling thing I've ever said out loud, but I stand by it. I think. Yeah, Disability Pride's a good book. I'm gonna kind of hopefully mine some more stuff out of it and bring that forward into my work and my life, um, and I think that's an important thing. It's not the only important thing. It's the most important thing. I don't know. Maybe. No, the most important thing is beautiful aesthetics, obviously. Uh, but yeah, that's this episode of No No Buzz on Ben Matlin's Disability Pride dispatches from a post ADA world. Thanks for not watching.